The porch light flickered as I fumbled with my keys, exhaustion weighing down my shoulders like a lead blanket. Another 12-hour day wrestling with commercial lease agreements and stubborn landlords had left me drained. All I wanted was a beer, maybe some leftover pizza, and the blessed silence of my own home. But silence wasn't what greeted me when I opened the front door. An unfamiliar woman sat at our dining table, her hands folded calmly in front of her, as if she'd been invited for Sunday dinner. She was perhaps 40, with sharp cheekbones and steel-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Henry!" Paula's voice cracked like a whip from the kitchen doorway. My wife appeared, her usually perfect blonde hair disheveled, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Where have you been? Who is this woman? Are you sleeping with her?" I stayed silent, setting my briefcase down slowly. Something electric hummed in the air, a tension so thick I could taste it. The stranger's lips curved into the faintest smile, as if she was enjoying a private joke. "I'm Marina Cross," the woman said, her voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Evan's wife." The color drained from Paula's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Evan Cross, regional director at PharmaCorp, Paula's colleague, and according to the evidence I'd been quietly gathering for months, much more than that. Marina reached into her purse and withdrew a phone, sliding it across the polished mahogany table toward Paula. "I think you should see this." Paula's hands trembled as she picked up the device. Her eyes darted across the screen, growing wider with each passing second. Text messages, calendar invitations, photos, all the digital breadcrumbs of a carefully hidden affair laid bare in high-definition clarity. "It's not what it looks like," Paula screamed, her voice breaking. "Henry, please, let me explain. This is all a misunderstanding." I finally spoke, my voice steady and cold as winter rain. "The conversation's over, Paula." She stared at me as if I'd slapped her. "What do you mean it's over? We need to talk about this. We need to do exactly nothing," I said, loosening my tie. "Marina and I have already done all the talking necessary." The truth was, I'd suspected Paula's affair for months. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in weekend team-building retreats that never seemed to build anything except distance between us. Paula thought she was clever, but she'd never been as smart as she believed. "I'm Henry Dalton, 46 years old, and I manage commercial real estate leases for small businesses in our slowly fading New England city. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest, and it's taught me to read people, to spot the lies they tell themselves and others." Paula worked in pharmaceutical marketing, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency, while I stayed grounded in the practical world of square footage and lease terms. "You've been planning this," Paula whispered, her face pale as moonlight. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied. "Long enough to contact the right lawyers, secure our joint accounts, and have some very interesting conversations with HR at PharmaCorp." Marina stood gracefully, smoothing down her skirt. "Company policy is quite clear about relationships between employees, especially when one reports to the other. Creates all sorts of complications." Paula's pharmaceutical career had always been her pride and joy, her ticket to the lifestyle she craved. She'd worked 15 years to reach her current position as senior marketing director, and she wasn't about to let a messy affair destroy everything she'd built. "You can't do this to me," Paula said, her voice rising to a near shriek. "I'll deny everything. I'll say you're lying, that you fabricated—" "The evidence speaks for itself," Marina interrupted, her tone remaining conversational. "Hotel receipts charged to your corporate card, security footage from the Marriott downtown, text messages discussing quarterly reports that don't exist in any PharmaCorp database." I watched Paula's world crumble in real time, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. She'd made her choices, and now she'd live with the consequences. "Henry, please," Paula begged, reaching for my arm. "We can work through this. Couples therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Don't throw away 18 years of marriage over one mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed, the sound harsh in the suddenly quiet room. "Paula, you've been sleeping with your boss for 8 months. You've lied to my face every single day. You've used our joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms where you slept with another woman's husband. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of choices." Marina gathered her purse and moved toward the door. "I'll be in touch about the divorce proceedings, Henry. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow morning." After she left, Paula collapsed into a chair, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking completely. "How did you find out?" "You got sloppy," I said, pouring myself 3 fingers of bourbon. "Left your laptop open one too many times, started taking calls in the shower, changed your perfume to something that smelled like guilt and desperation." "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered. "But it did happen, and now we all get to live with the consequences." The house fell silent except for the ticking of our anniversary clock and Paula's quiet sobs. I finished my drink and headed upstairs, leaving her alone with the wreckage of her choices. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning arrived gray and bitter, matching my mood perfectly. Paula had spent the night on the living room couch, and I could hear her making frantic phone calls before dawn, her voice a desperate whisper that carried through the thin walls of our colonial-style home. I dressed methodically, charcoal suit, blue tie, the armor of a man who had work to do. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked older than my 46 years, but there was something new in my eyes. Purpose, maybe. Or just the cold satisfaction of a plan finally set in motion. At the office, I found Randy Martinez already at her desk, fingers flying across her keyboard with unusual enthusiasm. My assistant was 25, sharp as a razor, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to gather information about everyone in our small commercial real estate firm. "Morning, Mr. Dalton," she said, not looking up from her screen. "Interesting night?" "You could say that." I poured coffee from the ancient machine in our break room, noting how the bitter brew matched my disposition perfectly. "Any urgent messages?" "Nothing that can't wait." She finally looked up, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. "But I did hear some fascinating gossip from my friend who works at PharmaCorp. Apparently, there's going to be an emergency HR meeting this morning. Something about policy violations and inappropriate workplace relationships." Word traveled fast in our city. The pharmaceutical company was one of the largest employers in the region, and gossip from their corporate headquarters spread through the community like wildfire. Paula's carefully guarded secret was about to become very public knowledge. My phone buzzed with a text from Marina. "Phase 2 begins now. Check your email." I opened my laptop to find a detailed timeline of Paula and Evan's affair, complete with documentation that would make any HR department freeze. Hotel receipts, expense reports for fictional business trips, email exchanges that had nothing to do with pharmaceutical marketing, and everything to do with scheduling their clandestine meetings. "Randy," I called out, "cancel my morning appointments. I have some personal business to attend to." She nodded knowingly. "Should I expect any interesting phone calls today?" Probably several. The first call came at 9:30. Paula, her voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Henry, you have to stop this. Marina filed a formal complaint with HR. They're launching an investigation. My boss wants to see me in an hour, and I don't know what to tell him." "Tell him the truth," I suggested, leaning back in my desk chair. "Novel concept, I know. This will destroy my career. Everything I've worked for gone. Is that what you want?" What I wanted was a wife who didn't lie to me every day for 8 months. What I wanted was to come home to someone who respected our marriage vows. But we don't always get what we want, do we, Paula? She hung up on me. The second call came from an unknown number at 11:15. "Dalton, This is Evan Cross. We need to talk. I don't think we do. Listen, you snake. I don't know what game you're playing, but… No game, Evan. Just consequences. You slept with my wife, and now you get to explain that to your employer, your wife, and anyone else who cares to listen. You're making a mistake. I have connections in this city, influence you can't imagine. If you don't back down, I'll make sure you never work in real estate again. I laughed, the sound echoing through my small office. Evan, you're a middle management pharmaceutical executive in a fading New England city. Your idea of influence is getting a good table at the country club. Don't threaten me with things you can't deliver. He hung up too. By noon, Randy had fielded 6 calls from various PharmaCorp employees, 3 from Paula's friends, and 2 from reporters who'd somehow caught wind of the scandal. Our little office was becoming the unofficial information hub for the biggest corporate drama our city had seen in years. This is better than cable television, Randy observed, organizing the message slips with obvious glee. Your wife's affair is the talk of the entire business district. That afternoon, I decided to visit Lyle Brooks at his bar, the Rusty Anchor. Lyle had been my friend since college, a former Marine who'd traded his uniform for the life of a small business owner. His establishment sat in the shadow of the old textile mills, serving honest drinks to honest people who worked with their hands. Jesus, Henry, Lyle said as I settled onto a bar stool. The whole city's talking about Paula and that pharmaceutical asshole. How you holding up? Better than expected. I accepted the bourbon he poured without being asked. Turns out revenge is surprisingly therapeutic. Marina Cross came by earlier, he said, wiping down glasses with practiced efficiency. Interesting woman, sharp as a knife and twice as dangerous. She's been very helpful in documenting her husband's extracurricular activities. You sure you know what you're doing? This kind of thing can get messy fast. I sipped my bourbon, letting the warmth spread through my chest. Lyle, I've spent 20 years managing commercial leases. You know what that teaches you? That everything comes down to contracts and consequences. Paula broke our contract. Now she gets the consequences. The bar's television was tuned to the local news, and I watched with grim satisfaction as a reporter stood outside PharmaCorp's headquarters discussing an ongoing investigation into employee misconduct. They didn't mention names, but they didn't need to. Everyone who mattered already knew. My phone buzzed with another call from Paula. They suspended me, she said without preamble. Pending investigation. They escorted me out of the building like a common criminal. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not. You're enjoying this. She wasn't wrong. Paula, you made your choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie about it. You chose to use company resources to facilitate your relationship with a married man. These are just the natural consequences of those choices. I'll fight this. I'll hire lawyers, contest everything. You won't get away with destroying my life. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure the truth comes to light. That evening, I returned home to find Paula gone. Her clothes, her toiletries, her collection of pharmaceutical industry awards, all vanished as if she'd never existed. She'd left behind only a note. This isn't over. I poured myself another bourbon and sat in my empty house, listening to the silence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new confrontations, new opportunities to ensure that everyone involved in this mess faced the full weight of their choices. The game was just beginning. 3 days after Paula's suspension, I discovered just how quickly social dynamics could shift in a small city. Friends who'd shared barbecues in our backyard for years suddenly found reasons to avoid my calls. The couples we'd socialized with at dinner parties and charity events began treating me like a pariah, as if my wife's infidelity was somehow contagious. The first real confrontation came at Murphy's Deli, where I'd been grabbing lunch for 15 years. Tom Sullivan and his wife Jennifer were sitting at their usual corner booth when I walked in. Tom had been my golf partner every Saturday morning for the past 5 years, but when he saw me, his expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. "Henry," he said, standing as I approached, "we need to talk." Jennifer remained seated, her arms crossed, her mouth set in a thin line of disapproval. What you're doing to Paula is cruel and vindictive. What I'm doing is holding people accountable for their actions, I replied, keeping my voice level. Paula had an affair. That's not my fault. But destroying her career? Tom shook his head. That's going too far, man. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to lose everything. She didn't just make a mistake. She made a series of calculated decisions over 8 months. She lied to me, to her employer, and to everyone who trusted her. You're being vindictive, Jennifer insisted. A good man would have tried to work things out privately, not aired their dirty laundry for the whole city to see. I looked at these people I'd considered friends, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't concerned about right or wrong. They were uncomfortable with consequences, with the messy reality of what happened when someone's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled. A good man, I repeated slowly. Jennifer, what would you do if you discovered Tom had been sleeping with his secretary for 8 months? Would you quietly forgive him and pretend it never happened? Her face flushed red. That's completely different. How? Because Tom would never, neither would Paula, according to everyone who knew her. Yet here we are. Tom stepped closer, his voice dropping to an angry whisper. You're making all of us uncomfortable, Henry. The way you're handling this, it's not normal. It's obsessive. Obsessive? I laughed, the sound bitter in the small deli. Tom, my wife was sleeping with her boss in hotel rooms paid for with our joint credit card. She lied to my face every single day. She violated her company's ethics policies and potentially compromised sensitive business information. But I'm obsessive for wanting the truth to come out? Other customers were staring now, conversations fading as my voice carried across the restaurant. I didn't care. These people had already made their judgments. We can't be friends with someone who would do this to his own wife, Jennifer said, her voice shaking with self-righteous indignation. It's too cruel, too calculated. Then I guess we're not friends, I replied, turning to leave. Enjoy your lunch. The pattern repeated itself over the following days. Mark and Susan Chen, who'd been our neighbors for 8 years, suddenly found reasons to avoid eye contact when I retrieved my mail. Dave Rodriguez, my former tennis partner, canceled our standing Wednesday evening games without explanation. Even my barber, old Mr. Peterson, seemed uncomfortable when I sat in his chair, making stilted conversation about the weather instead of our usual easy banter about local sports. It was Randy who finally explained what was happening. They're scared, she said, organizing files in my office while I brooded over coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Your wife's friends, your couple friends, they're all thinking about their own marriages, their own secrets. What you did to Paula, it's like holding up a mirror to show them how fragile their own lives really are. So they're taking her side? They're taking the side that makes them feel safe. If they can convince themselves that you're the villain in this story, then they don't have to worry about what their own spouses might be hiding. That afternoon, Marina called with an update that lifted my spirits considerably. Evan's been placed on administrative leave, she reported, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. The company's investigation found evidence of policy violations, misuse of corporate resources, and potential conflicts of interest. His career at PharmaCorp is effectively over. And Paula? Terminated this morning. They're considering legal action to recover the money she spent on personal expenses using company accounts. I felt a surge of vindication, but it was tempered by the knowledge that my own social circle had largely turned against me. Marina, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret starting this? The investigation, the public exposure, all of it? She was quiet for a long moment. Henry, my husband betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. He violated our marriage vows, lied to my face, and used our joint resources to facilitate his affair. But more than that, he made me look like a fool to everyone we know. The humiliation, the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room, the pitying looks from friends who knew what was happening before I did. That's unforgivable. So, revenge is worth the cost? Revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure that actions have consequences, that people can't just destroy other people's lives without facing any repercussions themselves. Your wife and my husband thought they were clever, that they could have their affair and maintain their respectable public images. They were wrong. That evening, I sat in the Rusty Anchor, nursing a bourbon and watching the local news coverage of PharmaCorp's ongoing scandal. The reporter was careful not to mention names, but everyone in the bar knew exactly who she was talking about. "Rough week?" Lyle asked, refilling my glass without being asked. "I've lost most of my friends. The ones worth keeping will come around. The others weren't really friends to begin with." "Maybe." I swirled the amber liquid in my glass, thinking about the price of truth. "Lyle, do you think I'm handling this wrong? Everyone seems to think I should have tried to work things out quietly, kept it private." He leaned against the bar, his weathered face thoughtful. "Henry, I've seen a lot of men deal with betrayal in my time. Some people drink themselves into ruin, some get violent, some just disappear into themselves and never come back. You? You're fighting back with the truth. That takes courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like necessity. Sometimes they're the same thing." As I walked home through the quiet streets of our small city, I realized that I'd crossed a line somewhere along the way. The man who'd discovered his wife's affair 3 weeks ago would have been horrified by the systematic way I was dismantling Paula and Evan's lives. But that man had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best about people, even when the evidence suggested otherwise. This new version of myself was harder, colder, more willing to accept that sometimes the only way to get justice was to take it yourself. The real confrontation was still coming. I could feel it building like a storm on the horizon, and when it finally broke, there would be no going back for any of us. The call came on a Thursday evening while I was reviewing lease agreements in my study. Tom Sullivan's voice was tight with anger when I answered. "We need to meet," he said without preamble. "Tonight. Murphy's parking lot, 9 o'clock. "Tom, if you want to discuss—" "This isn't a discussion, Henry. This is an intervention. What you've done to Paula has gone too far, and it needs to stop." The line went silent. I stared at the phone for a moment, then checked the time. 8:30. Just enough time to drive across town and face whatever confrontation my former friends had planned. Murphy's Deli sat in the older part of downtown, surrounded by empty storefronts and the ghosts of better economic times. The parking lot was poorly lit, with only 2 functioning streetlights casting weak yellow pools across the cracked asphalt. When I arrived, I found 4 cars already waiting. Tom and Jennifer's Lexus, Dave Rodriguez's pickup truck, Mark Chen's Honda, and Susan Chen's BMW. They'd formed a semicircle near the back of the lot, like some suburban tribunal preparing to pass judgment. As I approached, I could see the tension in their postures, the way they stood slightly apart from each other as if uncertain about their own solidarity. "Henry," Tom said, as I stopped a few feet away from their group. "Thanks for coming." "Did I have a choice?" "We're worried about you," Jennifer said, her voice carrying the false warmth of someone trying to sound reasonable. "The way you've been acting since Paula left, it's not healthy." "Not healthy?" I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet parking lot. "My wife was sleeping with her boss for 8 months, and I'm the one with the problem." "What Paula did was wrong," Dave Rodriguez interjected. "Nobody's disputing that. But your response has been completely disproportionate." Mark Chen nodded agreement. Destroying her career, humiliating her publicly, turning this into a citywide scandal. That's not justice, Henry. That's revenge. "And what's wrong with revenge?" I asked. "Paula made her choices. She chose to have an affair. She chose to lie about it. She chose to use our joint resources to facilitate her betrayal. Why shouldn't there be consequences? Because you're supposed to be better than that, Susan Chen said, her voice rising. You're supposed to be the mature one, the one who takes the high road. The high road? I stared at her in disbelief. Susan, the high road is where doormats go to get walked on. The high road is where naive husbands go to get cuckolded while everyone else in town knows about it but them. That's not, Tom started to say. That's exactly what it is, I cut him off. You want me to quietly accept Paula's betrayal, file for divorce through lawyers, and pretend none of this ever happened. You want me to protect her reputation, preserve her dignity, and make sure she doesn't face any real consequences for destroying our marriage. We want you to act like a decent human being, Jennifer snapped, her facade of reasonableness finally cracking. We want you to stop this vindictive campaign before you completely destroy a woman who made one mistake. One mistake? My voice rose to match hers. Jennifer, Paula didn't accidentally fall into bed with Evan Cross. She didn't mistakenly charge hotel rooms to our joint credit card. She didn't inadvertently lie to my face every single day for 8 months. Those were deliberate, calculated choices. But did she deserve to lose everything? Dave asked. Her job, her reputation, her friends, was that really proportional to what she did? I looked at these 4 people, these former friends who'd shared dinners at our house, celebrated holidays together, been part of our lives for years. They genuinely couldn't understand why I wouldn't just quietly absorb Paula's betrayal and move on with my life. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice dropping to a conversational tone. If your spouses were having affairs, would you want to know about it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Tom and Jennifer exchanged glances. Dave shifted uncomfortably. The Chens looked at the ground. Of course, Tom finally said. And if you found out that everyone else knew about it before you did, how would that make you feel? That's not the point, Susan started. That's exactly the point. Paula didn't just betray me. She made me look like a fool to everyone who knew what was happening. She let me go to company parties and smile at Evan Cross while he was sleeping with my wife. She let me make small talk with Marina Cross while her husband was destroying my marriage. So this is about your ego, Mark said, his voice carrying a note of accusation. This is about being embarrassed. This is about consequences, I replied. This is about making sure that people can't just destroy other people's lives without facing any repercussions. You've become obsessed, Jennifer said. This isn't the Henry we know. The Henry we know would have handled this with dignity, with class. The Henry you know was a naive fool who trusted his wife and believed in the basic decency of people. That Henry is gone. Tom stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need to find that man again because this version of you is someone we can't be friends with. Then don't be, I said simply. I don't need friends who think I should quietly accept betrayal and humiliation. I don't need friends who believe victims should protect their abusers from consequences. Paula isn't an abuser, Dave protested. She's a woman who made a mistake and is paying a price that's completely out of proportion to what she did. Paula is a woman who systematically lied to and betrayed the person who trusted her most in the world. If you can't see the difference, then we really don't have anything more to discuss. I turned to walk back to my car, but Tom's voice stopped me. If you don't stop this vendetta, Henry, you'll end up alone. Completely alone. Is that really what you want? I looked back at the 4 of them, standing in their semicircle of moral superiority, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. Tom, I'd rather be alone with the truth than surrounded by people who think I should lie to protect someone who destroyed my life. As I drove home through the empty streets, I realized that the last of my old life had just ended in that parking lot. The friendships, the social connections, the comfortable assumptions about how decent people should behave, all of it was gone now. But I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I hadn't even realized was there. The confrontation had clarified something important. I was on my own now, but I was also free to pursue justice without worrying about what other people thought. The final phase of my plan was about to begin, and I no longer cared who approved of my methods. 2 weeks after the parking lot confrontation, I received an unexpected call from Marina Cross. Her voice carried a note of excitement that I hadn't heard before. "Henry, I've found something interesting. Can you meet me at the old Riverside Mall? Tonight, 9 o'clock? The Riverside Mall had been closed for 3 years, another casualty of changing shopping habits and economic decline. It sat like a concrete monument to better times, its empty corridors echoing with the ghosts of commerce. I couldn't imagine why Marina wanted to meet there, but her tone suggested this was important. I arrived to find the main entrance unlocked, which should have been my first warning that something unusual was happening. Marina stood in the central court, her silhouette illuminated by the emergency lighting that cast everything in an eerie red glow. "Thank you for coming," she said as I approached. "I have something to show you." She led me to what had once been a department store, now empty except for a few folding chairs and a laptop computer set up on a card table. The screen showed a video feed of the mall's main entrance. "I've been doing some additional research on our respective spouses," Marina explained, "and I discovered something that changes everything." She opened a file folder and handed me a stack of photographs. They showed Paula and Evan, but not in the hotel rooms or restaurants where I'd expected to find evidence of their affair. These photos were taken in what appeared to be a warehouse, and they showed Paula handing Evan packages that definitely weren't related to pharmaceutical marketing. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Industrial espionage," Marina replied. "Paula's been stealing proprietary information from PharmaCorp and selling it to their competitors. Evan wasn't just her lover, he was her partner in a scheme that's been going on for over a year." I stared at the photographs, my mind racing. "How did you find this?" "I hired a private investigator after our spouses were fired. I wanted to know if there were any other secrets, any other ways they might have betrayed us. This is what he found." The implications were staggering. Paula's affair had been bad enough, but corporate espionage was a federal crime. If these photos were authentic, my wife wasn't just an adulteress, she was a criminal. "Why are you showing me this here?" I asked, gesturing at the empty mall around us. Marina smiled, and for the first time, I saw something predatory in her expression. "Because I've invited them to join us. They think they're meeting a potential new buyer for their stolen information." As if summoned by her words, I heard footsteps echoing through the mall's corridors. 2 figures appeared at the entrance to our makeshift meeting space, Paula and Evan, both looking nervous and uncertain. "Henry?" Paula's voice cracked with surprise. "What are you doing here?" "Learning the truth," I replied, holding up the photographs. "The whole truth, this time." Evan stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Marina, what the hell is this? You said you had a buyer, someone who wanted to purchase—" "I lied," Marina said simply. "Just like you lied to me for over a year while you and Paula sold my husband's company's secrets to their competitors." The color drained from Paula's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and activated the recording app. "Because I'd love to hear you explain these photographs. I'd love to hear you explain how a marketing director gained access to proprietary research data. I'd love to hear you explain why you were meeting with representatives from 3 different pharmaceutical companies over the past 8 months. Paula looked around the empty store like a trapped animal. "Henry, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. It never is with you, is it?" I laughed, the sound echoing off the empty walls. First, the affair wasn't what it looked like. Now the industrial espionage isn't what it looks like. What is it, Paula? What's your explanation this time? Evan tried a different approach. "Look, Dalton, maybe we can work something out. Maybe we can come to some kind of arrangement." An arrangement? I stepped closer to him, noting how he instinctively backed away. Evan, you slept with my wife and helped her steal corporate secrets. What kind of arrangement did you have in mind? We could split the profits, he said desperately. There's been good money in this, really good money. We could make you a partner, cut you in for a percentage. I grabbed him by his expensive tie and slammed him against the empty store's wall. You think I want your dirty money? You think I want to be part of your criminal enterprise? Henry, stop! Paula screamed. You're hurting him! I'm just getting started, I replied, pressing Evan harder against the concrete. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you understand what you've cost me? It was just business, Evan gasped. Just information. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got hurt? I released him so suddenly that he stumbled. My marriage is destroyed. My reputation is ruined. My friends have abandoned me. My entire life has been turned upside down because of your business. Marina stepped forward, her laptop now displaying what appeared to be a live video stream. Actually, Henry, I think it's time we let the world know exactly what kind of business Paula and Evan have been conducting. What is that? Paula asked, staring at the screen in horror. A live broadcast to every major news outlet in the region, Marina replied. They're all very interested in corporate espionage stories, especially when they involve a company as prominent as PharmaCorp. The next few minutes were chaos. Paula screamed denials and threats. Evan tried to grab the laptop only to find himself face to face with my fist. Marina calmly narrated the evidence for her online audience, displaying photographs, documents, and recorded conversations that painted a picture of systematic corporate theft. This is insane, Paula shrieked. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I'm simply making sure that your actions have appropriate consequences. The FBI will be here within the hour, Marina announced, checking her phone. I've already provided them with copies of all the evidence. Industrial espionage is a federal crime, and the penalties are quite severe. Evan made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Marina, Henry, please, we can work this out. We can make this go away. Just tell me what you want. I looked at this man who had helped destroy my marriage and my life, and I felt nothing but cold contempt. What I want, Evan, is for you to face the consequences of your choices. What I want is for everyone to see exactly what kind of people you and Paula really are. The sound of sirens began echoing through the empty mall. Red and blue lights flashed through the skylights as law enforcement vehicles surrounded the building. Henry, Paula said, her voice breaking. Please, I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes, but don't let them arrest me. Don't let it end like this. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw her clearly for the first time in years. Not the successful pharmaceutical executive she pretended to be, not the loving partner she'd once been, but a criminal who had betrayed everyone who'd ever trusted her. Paula, I said quietly, you made your choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to steal from your employer. You chose to lie to everyone who cared about you. These are just the consequences. As federal agents entered the store and began reading Miranda rights, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't experienced in months. The truth was, finally, completely exposed. Paula and Evan would face justice not just for their adultery, but for their crimes. Marina and I walked out of the mall together, leaving our former spouses to their fate. The night air was cold and clean, washing away the stale atmosphere of betrayal and lies. Do you feel better? Marina asked as we reached our cars. I considered the question carefully. I feel finished, I said finally. Like I've finally closed a book that should have ended a long time ago. And what comes next? I looked back at the mall, where police lights continued to flash and investigators continued their work. Next, I start over. New city, new life, new identity. The Henry Dalton who trusted people and believed in second chances is gone. What's left is someone who understands that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. As I drove away from the Riverside Mall for the last time, I realized that I had become something I'd never intended to be: the villain in other people's stories. But I was a villain who had won, who had ensured that actions had consequences, who had made certain that betrayal came with a price. Paula and Evan would spend the next several years in federal prison, their careers destroyed, their reputations in ruins. Their former friends and colleagues would remember them not as successful professionals who made mistakes, but as criminals who had betrayed everyone who trusted them. I had gotten the last word, and it was the only word that mattered: justice.